Hello, and thank you for coming to sit in and hear about my lesson today. I'm Miss Thompson, and today I'm going to be covering what I'm going to be doing with my 2-year-olds today. We're going to be working on a sink and flow presentation, and this lesson is typically about 10 to 15 minutes long. I'm working with 10 students today, and so the objective for our lesson is for students to gather various objects around the room and decide whether they float or sink with assistance of the teacher and their peers. Each student will be given the opportunity to place a chosen object into the container and decide if it floats or not. Each child should be completing this activity with about 80% accuracy. So the standards for this procedure for 2-year-olds is the scientific thinking domain says that children at this age should be beginning to use simple tools to observe and explore. They're recognizing and beginning to respond to results and own actions. They can explore a greater variety of motions and objects. They can use basic words for speed and motion. They begin to describe, compare, sort, and classify objects based on the observational physical characteristics. And last but not least, begins to use words to describe basic physical properties of the state or matter of objects. So the essential question for my lesson today is, does the item sink or float? There are two, we're going to keep it simple, and that's the main question. So if you look here, we have the materials for this lesson today. You can see we have a large container, and later on we're going to be filling this with water to actually be doing the lesson. We have a few of the various objects that the kids have collected. We're going to find out if these items sink or float. And so let's just go over what this lesson looks like. So at the beginning of the day, we'll gather at the circle time. And to begin the lesson, I want my students and I to talk about sinking and floating and what is sink and float. I'll ask them and gather ideas of what they really think an item does when it sinks and what an item does when it floats. And after we've talked about that, we're going to stand up and we're going to gather items around our room. So we'll take about maybe 2 to 3 minutes just to go around the room, and each child can pick maybe an object or two to place into the container later. After each student has found an object, we'll move to the big table, and that's when we'll fill our bucket of water and we'll start our assignment. So for modeling, I, the teacher, and the assistant will go over the activity and how it works. I'll first place maybe a toy, and maybe I'll show them one that was going to float and an object that's going to sink, just so they can get an idea of what it looks like to sink or float. And for checking assistance, I'm going to be monitoring the students as they work, making sure students are keeping the water actually in the bin, we're not making much spills, there's no throwing, hitting, or pouring water into the floor. After the students will next work on discovering which items sink or float. They'll do this by taking turns by placing the objects into the container and deciding which action occurs, and they'll use materials provided with guided instruction. After this activity, we'll conclude with the students and the teacher going over the results. So that's what we have our pen and paper, because we're going to go over each item and just kind of look and see, well, did the little people, did he sink or did he float? And we'll record that on our chart. And once we have our chart completed, we're going to hang it up in our classroom so we can always go back and refer to it. For deferring my instructions and my strategies for different learners, so students who are learning at a higher level, I plan on introducing them to items of density and buoyancy, bringing those terms into the classroom, just letting them introduce and know what those terms mean. This will help them understand why the items are doing what they're doing. Students are getting a simple presentation of the concept. Lower level learners, they're going to have more assistance from the teacher and the assistant when placing and choosing what items should go into the bucket. We could even move the bucket outside into the playground if we're having trouble with water spilling, and we think that'll be more free for the kids and having more availability to the bucket. And they can splash and discover all they want. Students who need a whole different learning strategy, I plan on maybe just bringing out books that revolve about sink and float. Some good books I found were called Who Sank the Boat? And this story really offers kids the opportunity to learn what the concept means without having to physically touch the water or the toys. And a great extension I found for this activity is an orange. I think bringing an orange into the lesson would really shock their minds, because when we place the orange inside the water with the peel on, we'll see whether it's sinking or floating, and after we figure out that observation, we'll actually peel the orange and just place the orange in there without its shell and see if it still does the same action. The assessment, what I want students to know overall is I want each student to be able to figure out whether or not the item can sink or float, and help me decide what it did, and we'll record it on our chart paper. I'll know the child are learning the materials by using the materials correctly, because I will observe the process of the activity with them and guide them throughout the lesson. And how will I record it? Well, we're going to be recording it on our chart paper. So now that's about what we have today, and I'll go over how we're going to present this lesson now. So as you can see, we start off with bringing our bucket over to the water, and we fill our water bucket up. I fill it up about to this line just so we have enough water to really see if these materials are going to sink or float. All right, we're about there. All right, and I say that's a good amount. And then we bring this back over to the table. All right. And now about this time we have our water. Have a towel on handy just in case we do have spills. And at this point, each kid would have the opportunity to place their object into the water. So first we'll start off with our cap. We'll see if it sinks or floats. And that one seems to float. And then little Johnny could take his noodle and he'll place that in. And we have another one that floats. And then Noah could take his turn and see if his plate sinks or floats. We have one that sinks. So at this time, once we finally found one that sinks, maybe we'll take a minute to stop and let the kids explore, look inside, see what's happening. Maybe we'll try and question, why did that one float and why did that one sink? And next we'll give our next friend a turn. She'd come up, she'd drop her toy in, and it looks like the toucan's floating. We'll take our car and place it in. That one sinks. Our spatula, another one that sinks. Took a little bit more time to get down there, maybe because it's a little lighter. Our little people, floats. Got our peach, and that one floats. And last but not least, our pear, and that one floats. All right, so then we're gonna let our kids maybe observe what's going on. They can look at it, maybe pick them back up, see what's happening. They can have a little bit of opportunity to explore and discover what's going on in the bucket. And if they have more materials, then we'd let them put more materials in. And after that, we'd wrap it up and come back down to the big circle and just talk about what's sinking, what's floating. So the teacher, I'll usually have this bucket and they're gonna sit around at the circle. And I'm just going to take which one. We could use our towel at this moment and just kind of lay this out just so once we bring the object out, water's not getting everywhere. So we'll start off with the noodle. And I'll ask my kids, guys, did this object sink or float? And I'll record their answer. We'll mark it over here. We'll set up our chart paper like this. We'll put a sink column and a float column. You see we just divided that down the middle. Sink and our float. And our pool noodle, we decided it float. So we'll write our pool noodle on the float side. Our little people, sink or float, boys and girls. And this one floated. So we'll add him to our float side. Let's now maybe trick them up and we'll do a one that's synced. So we got our plate, that one's synced. And you're just gonna go through the process with the kids and just go through each object. And at the end, we can tape our item up, and we would just post that up on the wall, and then we keep that there in our class for the rest of the day. And that's my lesson on sink and float. So if you have any questions, just ask me, and I'm here. Thanks so much for coming in. Bye, guys.